conflict of interest, which was part of the utility committee in which we testified last April. So you can bring up those angles, including conflict of interest. But I look at you with a sense, and you know, this is an emotional reaction, an intuition, a sense of complete political immunity. And this is really what we face in Maine. We have deconstructed all the angles of wind power, but we're facing a barrage of self-assurance of the politician here that they are immune to even use those analyses to move on in the assessment of wind power. They can stay stuck in their ignorance. They can stay stuck in the knowledge of people complaining about the problem and still say, we don't give a damn. And so to me is where is, and it's at level, it's at the judicial branch, it's at the executive branch, and it's at the legislative branch. Where does the sense of immunity come from?
Well, I think they probably feel immune because they feel that they are on the side of the majority of citizens are supportive of their efforts effectively, and they feel that you know, if they put this to a vote, that the majority of Maine citizens, that their constituency would be in agreement with what they say. So if you come along and express a minority position, well, they're going to feel somewhat immune to that. You know, because people tell them minority positions all the time. You know, there's hundreds of issues that legislators have to deal with. So typically they're weighing to say, okay, is this person expressing majority consensus here, or is this a fringe consensus? And what I'm saying is we have to get out of the fringe consensus here. That's probably their perception, that we're just a few complainers that are speaking primarily because we're NIMBYs or whatever. You know, they like to compartmentalize you, minimize you, pigeonhole you into that type of thing. So a political effort here is necessary, certainly. For instance, in New York, one of the ways that we were successful in a lot of towns was a very specific political campaign to get out the people that were in office that were facilitating these type of decisions because they've been bought off or whatever. And I can tell you, because I was involved with several of them, that in probably over 90%, at least something in that neighborhood, 90% of the politicians who were targeted by citizens as being, you know, unreasonable wind proponents, because these are local things, 90% of them were gotten out of office. I mean, an amazing statistic. Have you seen the movie Wind Fall?
I was just going to bring it to it. That's Meredith.
Well, Meredith happens to be an example, but yes, that is part of what the story is about here. Meredith is good that they put that in film. But I can give you many other cases where this was the case here throughout the whole state, because I'm familiar with these things all over. So that is one way of doing it. But so that obviously, once that happens, once there seems to be a group that has political clout, well, then you're going to get their attention. If they think you're representing a constituency that all of a sudden puts their, you know, power base, their, you know, position here in jeopardy, you won't get the same reaction to them then. So you've got to come to them with some indication you've got some clout.
I think it's like a gift that keeps giving, and as we're having more projects, you know, where we live, particularly in the River Valley, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. We have one project that's going on the Raccoon Hill, as you know, and many mountains around us slated to be affected with turbine also, but the project haven't been all decided. So I think this will happen. Visualization of what's happening in Raccoon Hill will bring more people to press the politician. I think that's the game that we have to pursue.
Another thing that I talked about last night was that on my website I have an article called Legal Strategies. I don't know if you've read that, but most cases that I've seen where citizens decide to sue, let's say their town's representatives or whatever for acting inappropriately, that they make choices that the type of lawsuits, in my view, are pretty toothless, they're pretty benign. So usually what happens is they sue because, I don't know, procedures weren't followed properly or something like that. And what usually happens from that is that the town fights this lawsuit that goes on and whatever. So let's say the citizens win. Well, citizens to spend thousands of dollars and maybe a year or two at a time, and what have they gotten out of it? Well, in my view, probably not a lot. I mean, maybe they delayed things, whatever. So there is a better way of doing things, and that is, in my view, you have to fight fire with fire. So if you're dealing with people that are pretty bad, I think you've got to pull out all the stops and from my perspective are, number one, ordinarily when you sue, let's say, one of your representatives, and this could apply to a state representative as well, if it's appropriate. The 1983 suit, by the way, is based on their actions violating your civil rights. That's the gist of it. Something they've done is violated your civil rights. So maybe, for instance, your civil rights may be violated because their actions have allowed a wind project to be near your house, and your house has become unlivable, as an example, or significant decrease in value. Well, that's very well easily could be construed as a violation of your rights as a citizen. So, the two big things here about suing a representative about this is that the law of this section 1983 requires that the person sued has to pay for their representation, their lawyer, themselves. In other words, ordinarily if you sue somebody that's a town person, the town pays for this person to be represented. Well, not in this case. This case is that person, by statute, has to pay for their own representation. That's one thing. The second thing is that if you're victorious, if you win the suit for some financial claim against this person, it has to come from them personally. In other words, they can't say the town will pay this or the town's insurance will pay this. It has to come directly from them. That's what the statute says. So the fact that those two threats are over a person's head who gets sued like this are very substantial. All of a sudden, you will see this gets their attention. So I cited the example last night that one case I saw, and I did some research this in New York State, was a townsperson, a citizen, was dissatisfied with his tax assessment. Simple thing is a tax assessment. He didn't like the assessment and he tried to get it fixed, and he thought that he didn't do it fairly. So he went to a lawyer, a guy who was aggressive, and said, what options we got? And this lawyer said, let's try a 1983 suit. So the town was sued as this guy's civil rights were violated because of his tax assessment being inappropriate. That's what happened. So the town said, this is crap, this isn't right, and their counter response is that this wasn't a pertinent application of the 1983 section application, so it went to court. And the appellate court of New York State upheld the citizen's right to do it. So there's precedent right there that says this citizen legally has the right to sue a town's, board person, councilman, selectman, whatever, just because he doesn't like his own tax assessment. Well, that's a profound thing. So I can tell you, see, what people say to me, well, okay, but that's going to be a hard thing to win in court. Anybody says that just doesn't get it. The point is they're never going to go to court. Once the person realizes they've got to pay a lawyer hundreds of dollars an hour here, and the clock is ticking, so that their legal expenses here to defend themselves might run $10,000 or something, and then they're facing maybe a claim of $500,000 besides that they're going to have to pay out of their own pocket. They are not going to go to court to risk that. They are going to settle. They have too much of an upside here. They are going to settle. So they're going to come back to you and say, okay, Lenny, what do we need to do to work this out? Well, that's where all of a sudden you're going to have their attention. And you're going to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm expecting to do, A, B, C, D, E. That's what. Either that or we're going to go to court.
Is that the only precedent? Because we actually brought that suggestion to our attorney 2 years ago. We wanted to look at the civil rights aspect to him. But he told us there was no precedent. So that
Well, let me be polite here. I'd say 99% of attorneys in the country are not applicable for this type of matter. You need the right type of an attorney. So this is an attorney, number one, that has to be familiar with federal law. This is a federal matter. You need an attorney that's aggressive, not, somebody that's,
Right, get
I
that.
would say you need a new attorney, would be my opinion, is the politest way I can say it. Without even knowing it, if anybody says that, your attorney is supposed to be aggressively looking out your best interest here. I'm telling you, there is precedent. That was just with me, a non-lawyer, looking up a few things, I found that precedent. As I said, the real thing isn't to say, well, some attorneys are gonna say, well, that's gonna be difficult to argue in court. Okay, that's all I need to hear. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye. I mean, I would stop talking to that attorney right there. He doesn't get it. That isn't what the case is about. The whole idea is to bring some leverage to the table here, to get their attention with some leverage. This is legitimate legal leverage. We need some power here. That's an example of using some legal muscle here to get their attention.
What about suing a wind developer for misleading information to bring the people to vote towards certain information of a project?
I think there's merit to that. I think there's a merit to suing the Public Utilities Commission, for instance, for approving some things that are completely contrary to their charter, so on and so forth. For instance, you may or may not know that an organization that I'm relatively recently belonged to, a fellow now actually, is the American Traditions Institute. Are you familiar with ATI? Okay, well, they asked me to be a fellow on this organization. I'm pretty selective in who I join, so I talked to them at length about their plans, and I knew some of the other people who were pretty good that are fellows, so I agreed to it. But one of the major reasons was that they said, we are actually gonna take on wind here in a serious way. So I said, well, show me what you mean. And they said, okay, well, we got two lead attorneys here, David Schneier and Chris Warner. You know them, but they're both pretty sharp national level attorneys. And said, what we're going to do is we're going to sue a state for their RPS. So we're gonna sue a state. So they even consulted me and said, okay, let's pick a state that we think we have the best chance of winning here. And after a variety of consultation, they picked Colorado. So the principle is, this is the first time ever, to my knowledge, that a state is being sued that their RPS is illegal. So they are doing this. They've already filed suit. So this is in the process of going through this. So they have a series of technical arguments that they're going to argue here. So if they're victorious in that one thing, that would have profound impact to every one of the other states that have an RPS, as an example. So I'm just giving, that's another example. There's a variety of ways we need to be aggressively responding to any of these ways. So suing a developer certainly has some merit. Absolutely, a lot of these things, these people say, are outright fraudulent. Fraudulent. So somebody needs to stand up and hold them accountable. Sure, I think there's merit to that.
So perhaps soliciting a former Enron CEO might be a good move. Somebody hard-headed that will
You
take
need somebody
baby's
hard-headed.
candy,
You need
even
somebody that goes for the throat, quite frankly.
goes
That's
for it,
it.
yeah.
Really?
Yes.
They all work